Boom, and we are live. Welcome to Social Selling Hour number 19 on this September 22nd. You might notice something a little different today. I'm in San Francisco. So being on the road and being a unique chat, we decided to throw a little curveball for everybody there today. We're going to do kind of a Rachel and Brian conversation with the community, bring everybody into amplifying our message. And I have these annoying things on my face because I think it's going to be a fun day. And I really would like glasses that were that size. So hello, afternoon, Rachel.
Hey, Brian. How are you?
I am good. You can chat about this real quick so I figure out how to turn off my cool 3D features real fast.
So, well, we do have a set question list today, and it's a topic that's actually very near and dear to both of our hearts. I by no means want to present myself as an expert on social influence, but the goal here today is kind of talk to you all and see, what you feel true social influence is and how you calculate it when you're building out new social campaigns.
That sounds good to me, and I agree. It's it's one of those topics I think that's always the interesting debate when you bring up. It's almost like an Android iPhone debate that I was dealing with all last weekend and last week, where you bring up clout or you bring up what influence means, and I think there's a lot of people that kind of think and categorize each of them differently. And I just realized my lower third's not on. Man, I'm already slacking. I take off my crown and my glasses, and my lower third disappears. But so yeah, I think this is gonna be a fun topic. I think the questions that majority of them Rachel kind of came up with from our community are some really good, exciting questions and kind of can move us forward. So I'll pose the first question, Rachel, and you can kind of give your insights on it, and we can kind of go from there. Does that sound good?
Yep.
All right. And so we have question one. What is social reach? And I'm not talking about this. And how does it affect your business results?
Okay, so as a kind of a textbook definition, just so you'll have a foundation, social reach is the total amplification of your message. So it includes all your social networks, how many people you're following, what is the potential maximum exposure of your message.
And I think this is an interesting one because for everyone who was tuning in last week with Tim McDonald, well, hold on. If you didn't tune in last week with Tim McDonald, you need to go watch the YouTube video after this. We'll provide the link. Don't go now. We will promise to put on a show now. But the talk with Tim McDonald last week, not only what I thought it was extremely insightful, but I went back and watched it, and I actually took out notes, and I started taking notes, and I actually took a picture of it and sent it to Tim from the standpoint of, like, there was some really good information he was sharing on community, what reach meant for No Kid Hungry, how they built out their campaigns, why they kind of changed from one metric to another. So I thought last week's chat with Tim McDonald, so Social Selling 18 on the YouTubes, because we do the Google Plus Hangout side, is definitely a good one to make sure you go back and listen and watch the show we had with Tim. And when I think of social reach, first thing I think of immediately is like it's the telephone game with good content. So I think of content, I picture myself in a bunch of cubicles and someone walked up in the Mad Men days, and walked up with a really good newspaper, and they passed the newspaper around, and and the reach is that kind of the dissemination of that newspaper. And I think there's times of slightly change when you think of that, because then there's the ability to copy it and share it without the other person knowing it and things like that. So I think there's a unique way of social reach being more than just what traditional reach is from a marketing perspective. So we have the Twitters are on, of course, and so we have lots of people out there on Twitter. So we'll give a couple of shout outs real quick. We have Wendy, Jeff is out there, Jessica, of course, sharing a lot of our stuff today. We have David, looking forward to tonight's Twitter chat. I think David's from across the pond. So love the worldwide audience that we have for Social Selling Hour. And so we're talking about how does it affect your business results. So when you think business results or reach, Rachel, what are you thinking there when you think of that side?
Well, traditionally, social reach has to do with, like a pay-per-click, a paid campaign. So it's a little bit different when you apply it to social media, because it's I mean, for the most part, it's free. I mean, there's obviously the time and effort of your employees and yourself, but it takes it to a whole new level. And I think, especially when you're starting out, like SMBs, they're really restricted by their resources. So leveraging social can be a huge differentiator. And content obviously plays a huge role in that. Because if it resonates with the community, it'll get retweeted and reshared, and your message is amplified times a million. We've seen the proof of that just with SS Hour. The retweets from our chats go all the way through the week, which is super cool. That people are finding us on various hashtags. So. And
I think that's part of the whole. When we talk reach or we talk about just social. Although your tweet kind of disappears, and I remember I'll have to find that blog post from Buffer. Buffer had a really good breakdown of how long an active, when you tweet something, how long that tweet actually kind of lives out there in the Twitter's verse before it kind of disappears. But I think with the amount of content and the amount of people that are learning how to better use social, the hashtag actually allows content to live on for a long time. And a great example is I posted a quote. The quote was talking about social listening, and Tim Fargo, I'm a big fan of his from just an inspiration and tweet level. He's a great guy to follow. Alphabet Success is his Twitter handle, but he retweeted it out there, and this was 27 days ago. And the reason I know that is I landed in San Francisco and looked at my thing, and I saw it be retweeted today, and I was like, what? And it had 27 days ago. So a tweet that I posted 27 days ago showed back up in my feed this morning, and I thought that was like an interesting thing, because you think of Twitter being such a fire hose of information and you're afraid to miss, but I don't know about you, Rachel, but for me, I don't just follow the public news feed. I have lists, I have hashtags. I know, especially from the listening side, give a little background on that side, kind of, because I think too often social reach is, people kind of think of it as that first touch point rather than the continuing on, the living on of your content as well as your message.
So I think my perspective is a little different, being, working for a business. So I'm a Hootsuite junkie. So I have, there's key influencers in my space that I follow. So I have columns in my Hootsuite that I use. And then I also use the filter by function to sort out what they're talking about. So I can pull up a tweet from 20 days ago, but it was something that Paul Greenberg said, and it's very poignant. So I'm going to reshare it now, even though it's 20 days old. So that's how I repurpose content and keep the conversation going on social. And I know a lot of people out there do the same, whether they're researching a topic for an article for their blog post or doing something for a new campaign. Things pop up all the time, and the timestamp isn't necessary. It's not as relevant as you would think it would be on Twitter.
No, and I agree, and I think that's also, I've used that term upcycling. So if we're playing how many times is Brian going to drop his buzzwords, there's one of mine. But yeah, I think we can just go through the three of them. Upcycling, show you care, screenshot awesomeness. We're good. Okay, we're done now with all of Brian's buzzwords. But that upcycling idea, really, what for me that is if I find that a tweet worked really well, either the way that I delivered it or the way I scoped it out for a brand, I actually will take that. I've even changed the title in a blog post or changed a title when I took a blog and made it a slide share based on what was most successful quote that I used tweeting it out. And I think that's a great, too often we're trying to analyze all of this crazy data instead of just looking at what really worked. Like if something resonated with your community based on the tweet itself, what in that tweet made them do that? And when you're upcycling your content into slide shares or Pinterest or whatever you're doing, use that same byline, because apparently it caught their attention. It's going to catch your new audience's attention for sure.
Yeah, actually that's funny. I often do A/B splits on what I'm sharing on Twitter, and if one title or one intro is outperforming, I change the title of the blog post to match that, because clearly it's grabbier. So that's a great tip for content marketers out there.
Is grabbier a official social learning listening term that you coined there?
Can I coin that?
You can coin grabbier. Grabbier is all yours.
Hashtag grabbier.
Yep. There. See, now we're gonna have Rachel's buzzwords.
Put it into a stalker setting, but.
So wherever Don Garrett is, if he's playing the drinking game with Social Selling Hour, he can use that one as the drinking one. So you can jump on question 2.
Yep. Let me. So question 2, is it possible to crack the social influence code? After all, isn't it all just numbers?
Ooh, numbers, data. So I got on this I actually was trying to explain what I did for a living, which if you guys haven't read C.C. Chapman's blog post last week where he talks about the question he hates to answer the most is, what do you do for a living? They have to read that post because I laugh now because I've been asked that like 6 times since I've read the blog post, and I almost want to take his approach to different ways. I answer it differently. I use a different title. I often say I stare at the Twitter feed all day long, waiting for a hashtag to come around. But I was explaining the.
Pick me.
Yes, I just sit there and tweet all day. But one of the things that was interesting when you're thinking about amplification and you're thinking about data, all these numbers, all this, influencer, for me, an influence really, someone is influential if they're influencing one person. You're an influencer. I think that the term influencer is often I think of it as influencers, and we can question or not if Beyonce drinking a Pepsi influences you to buy Pepsi, or influences you to remember that Beyonce is Beyonce and the queen of the world from that perspective. So I mean, what is your take on the numbers versus cracking that influencer code?
Well, I mean, I forget who's our friend Josh on Ted Rubin. Like everyone's an influencer. You influence one person or you're influencing a community. However, if we're talking grow large scale, you do need to get down and dirty with numbers. So for me, it entails a lot of spreadsheets and tools like Tracker and even Clout to determine influence. And I closely monitor Google Analytics, tracking who performs the best on certain publications. Obviously, someone writing in Forbes is going to, their message will be amplified just because it's Forbes, but somebody else could write on that same news outlet and get twice our and how they leverage community. So it's important to track all those numbers.
And I think when we're talking influence, I do. Yeah, so I'm getting some really good, I just kind of retweeting a couple people that are going through the Twitters now from Josh on point there, and Jessica even retweeted there. Relationships are more important for reach than numbers. Friend asked me to read your post, and I will. And gosh, is that not true? Good job. Josh is the man. Josh is a fellow Twitter chat addict like us from that standpoint. We're glad that Josh is jumping in there today. And I think that's so important to think about when we're talking about relationships and why relationships are important. Someone asked me, I think this was after our chat last time about community. I said, Brian, we understand that relationships is Ted Rubin's philosophy, and you guys really believe in what Ted's talking, and people are starting to understand that. But like, what the hell does a relationship do for my business? Like, that was the question that I got, and I just it's that simple question, and I'll return it to this the iPhone discussion that I was in last week for the iPhone 6 coming out, and the iPhone 6 Plus. I was that idiot or those crazy people that you saw on the TV camping out to get a iPhone 6 Plus, and the amount of people on that Saturday that asked me for my opinion, or I'm sorry, on that Friday, asked my opinion about the iPhone 6 Plus was, I've never had Facebook messages and text like I have on that day. And the funny part was, they all have watched the Apple commercials. They've all read the apple.com website. So why were they coming to me asking me for my opinion on it rather than just going? And it was because we have a relationship. They trust me to give them an honest opinion. And you know what? If Apple's watching, or those people that have that connection, you can tell them that I've convinced some people to get pluses and not to get pluses, which is a whole different thing. But I think that to me was resonating when I was thinking about influence, because I'm no expert by any chance of the imagination. Not on influence, not on iPhones. I've had a lot of them, and I use the hell out of them, but I am not anywhere close to an expert in that field. But people were looking for me because we had a relationship that I could give them honest advice or give them a website that I referenced to make my decision.
Yeah, we have a great tweet from Wendy saying social is never only about figures. And I completely agree. But they do play a part, and I think that's kind of what we're bringing home here. While your main goal shouldn't be to go out and convert everybody you're talking to, it's purely about engagement, the data is important. And when you're truly looking to scale as a brand or individual, you do need to pay attention to the data. Otherwise, you are just going to be having random conversations And if you don't have your end goal in mind, you're going to feel like you're wasting a lot of time on social.
Well, and I always use and this isn't a buzzword that I'm using, but I will tell a story with your data is what I always kind of stress. And when I think about tell a story with your data, I'm not thinking I think data is an important chapter in your entire story. But too often we get people are worried about ROI and answering the question, what the hell do you do, social media manager? What the hell do you do, social selling guy who sits there on the computer all day? Why don't you have the phone picked up? And I think we have to have an answer for that, or we're just going to get run off the road because we're not giving immediate results. And for me, it's that screenshotting, it's that capturing some of that immediate data and using it to tell the broader story.
Yeah, or just to prove that you're working on something, because in social we know it takes many, many touch points. I think they say it's up to 12 or 15 touch points to even get someone close to a conversion. So you have to track that along the way.
And if you're not, and we all know the game now is, and it goes from a sale, you have to build a long-term relationship, but you have to kind of show promise and push it along the path as well as, and that's why I really stress that screenshotting idea, because for me, I don't really know what's going to be valuable, but if I'm able to screenshot 8 touch points that I didn't even realize that this person was going to turn into a potential, purchaser, that data is already there waiting for me, that I can now, use that, not only use it to determine how I'm going to make the 9th touch point, but also to analyze it in the backwards looking and decide how the hell did I make this person come to how can I define their path to purchase? And I use screenshotting a lot to define the path to purchase for a lot of the people that end up making that decision.
Or even as we are talking about influence, it's not necessarily your touch points, but connecting them with someone in your community that can become a trusted advisor to you. It's connecting people to each other. That's my catchphrase.
For sure. And I think I like that, educating by example. That's a good one. So we're going to jump on to question 3. What is clout, and how can you? That's clout with a K. And how can you use the data they provide about an individual influence?
So I think as we're talking, data is really important. So whether you take it with a grain of salt or you swear by it, it is important on some level. And I know Clout has worked really hard the last couple of years to tweak their algorithm to make it more relevant, even with the introduction of their more content piece. Because obviously if you're influential about, for example, social media marketing and you're sharing content on that, it's probably going to boost your score in that area. They've received a lot of bad press. The Justin Biebers, the Beyonce, the Pepsis of the world have definitely thrown off their algorithm. But it's hard to say, like a lot of people really like Beyonce, and because she's drinking Pepsi, they're going to go out and buy Pepsi. How do you determine that to be a different form of influence from, say, Sam Fiorella? Yeah. And I'm more likely to drink Pepsi or Scotch because Sam's drinking Scotch. But that's because to me, he's a trusted advisor.
Yes, that's a very.
So I think it is really hard to calculate, but I do keep a close eye on those scores. And it's not for a vanity reason. It's just to kind of watch what people are doing and how it affects their score.
Well, and I'm always a big one. Someone actually, I think I was presenting at a conference, and someone asked me. They said, Brian, we want the honor. It was at the Social Fresh event. And they're like, Brian, we want to know the honest truth. Do you look at a cloud score before replying to somebody on social? And I was so offended by the question because I didn't know that anyone would do that. So I was like, what do you mean look at their cloud score before you reply? If someone engaged me or messaged me, I'm going to reply. Like, their cloud score doesn't dictate if I can reply to them or not. Like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But I understood the question looking back because especially the gamification. I mean, no matter what you're in, you could have the ability to gamify it. If Foursquare badges, I mean, I have a guy that's in my neighborhood, near my house. He checks in every hour at 13 places, every single day, just to game, because apparently he just likes those little icons on his Foursquare app. I don't know why he does it, but I mean, you can gamify anything from that standpoint. But I like to use Clout. I always like to do it as kind of like not a measurement of someone of their standing, but like where they stand in the Clout scenario, especially from the engagement perspective. Because I mean, we have to face it. When you think of influencers today, often we put an influencer out there that maybe wrote a really good book, but they wrote a really good book about Twitter 4 years ago and haven't been engaging on Twitter but dropping links every single time and haven't had a reply in those 4 years, that person is not an influencer on Twitter anymore. And I'm sorry that might offend somebody, but I mean, you agree, Rachel?
Completely, and it is hard. I mean, personally, I've been contemplating writing a book, but you want it to stay relevant. And there are marketing books that I read that came out 5, 10 years ago that are still incredibly relevant, but it's more tactical theory than actual tools. So I think you have to know if you're going to write about something like LinkedIn or Twitter, you need to revise it regularly because those platforms are evolving really, really quickly. And I think it's great if you are an expert on that certain network and you can share your advice, but just be warned that you're going to have to practice what you preach. Otherwise, no one's going to take you seriously.
Well, and I think that also comes down to just like if we're talking about, you know, if you think about clout this way, like I like to think about clout that if someone's not on it, I don't think less of them. If they have a low clout score, it doesn't. I don't really judge from but if someone's clout score is constantly if they're on my radar and then their clout score is moving up and that's something that I'm listening to or following, it will matter to me at that point. And I actually like clout now on a whole different measure for content sharing, because clout has actually done a really good job of being, you know, they pivoted, and I think the article that Rachel was sharing a little bit earlier today, you know, the clout, you know, they pivoted for that, and many people would say they pivoted too late. But I think the content engine on my little topics, especially like the one social business is a great one. If you have social business in your clout topic, the social business articles that I'm getting that when they say like on the rise and 14% of your audience has seen it, I will look in my feed, and I'll actually, because I'm a geek like that, I'll search for the title, and oftentimes it hasn't been shared on Twitter yet. And if I can find a great piece of content that hasn't been shared on Twitter yet, I feel like I'm the champion, because I'm gonna get there before all the noise, before it goes into the other ballot. So I would, those that hate on clout, and there's definitely plenty of reasons. We'll talk about transparency at the end, and clout did the opposite of transparency. They decided to say nothing instead of admitting a fault whenever they kind of got exposed. But I think there's definitely an advantage and a reason from that. And we pull up that, clout is there's a couple good ones here on clout from our community standpoint. It's worth looking at your influence to inform. So Andrew Jenkins asked the question, is it worth looking at influence to inform versus influence to cause action? Awesome. I love that question, Andrew, and you should have clicked on your Google Plus camera and jumped on as a previous guest, because I would love to hear your take on just on the backside of that as well. But no, that's a great question. What do you think about that, Rachel?
I think it's one of many, many moving parts when determining influence. And I wouldn't discount it, because there's got to be something to their algorithm, and I know they're working really hard on making it as relevant as possible. And other tools like Tracker are doing the same thing. They're taking that clout data and then augmenting it with their own algorithm to determine not only individuals' influence, but also how it affects their grouping, which is really cool to see. You can see how much influence someone specifically has over another individual. So no, it's definitely something I consider. But I would never not respond to anybody or contact someone purely based on clout score.
And I think there's I see Todd Burgess just jumped in as he said a chat about clout. I'm all in. And to me, this chat is less about clout and it's more about the data and the influence that And I was at if you listen to any Jay Baer today, Jay has his Jay Today 3-minute videos. And if I wasn't on the road, you'd see the utility book behind me right now. And the reason I was a big fan of utility, and I recommend subscribing to his 3-minute podcast. Jay gives some insights, 3 minutes a day, every day, and almost every one of them make me want to write a blog post about them because they're that actionable. But one of the things that Jay always talks about is your content that helps is the content that is the best received, and and when we think about influence, if you're back to Andrew's question, influence that's informing, or content that's informing, that has the ability to influence someone's decision on if you're a valid business. If you're if this, I'll use an app company because there's an app company in my head, and this app company, they haven't put out an app yet, a mobile app, but they've been posting a ton of great content on data privacy and the importance of data management when it comes to apps. Whenever they put their app out, I'm gonna go get their app, not because they were influencing me to get it by, making me make a decision. They were just influencing, or they were informing me in general about the actual industry. It had nothing to do about their tool. I actually had to go figure out what their tool actually did because their content was so written at a holistic. It was great. I think that's a different way of thinking influence. And I like your question there, Andrew. And if we didn't answer it correctly, all in detail, we'll have to go a little bit more in depth later on.
The blog post.
Yes, I agree.
So let's move on to question 4. Last week we had the amazing Tim McDonald on, and he pretty much schooled us in community and the differences between network, community, and tribe. So how does the human community help amplify your marketing messages?
That's interesting. So, the power of community and the idea of the human aspect of it is really, it's important to me. And I would say I will give a plug to Brian Kramer, who wrote the book H to H, who I've shared that out today on social because I had the honor of watching him in a TED Talk tomorrow, and his stance is always human to human. And both Brian Kramer and Ted Rubin are books that I think are the ones that transcend social, because it's not going to get old no matter what tool we're using, no matter what method we're using. I even got into this great topic on If This Then That, the app. That's an automation app that just allows me to communicate with humans better at a better scale, and I'm not engaging with that app, but I'm using that app to automate some things in the backside. And so I think the human aspect, especially when you're talking about in communities are built of people. They're not built of any, there's not, you don't have an automated community, and well, maybe you will one day when we have RoboCop type devices. But today I think the human element of amplifying your marketing content, when Tim,
they put that chip.
Yes. When Tim McDonald was saying it before, what did he was talking about? How did he amplify his message? He didn't spam it out to every PR feed there was to get in every single person's news feed. He individually asked people, human to human, if they could retweet and share something. And I think that has a huge impact. It had a big impact on me.
I agree, and he was very tactical, and obviously he didn't reach out to strangers. He reached out to people who he already had amazing relationships with, and that's a key part of it too. It's that give, get. I think you have to have rapport before you can do an ask like that.
Yes, and we have spot on right here. Josh, again, I feel like I'm going to give Josh some more love. Community should be your marketing focus. Connect, help, share. That's the essence of social selling, and I couldn't agree more, especially because that's really where I come in from that aspect of it. And I think just to kind of put this, I think there's so many great books that can be written, and books that are out there today, that it's not about always the tools. And I always hate talking. As much as I'm an evangelist and I'm a technology guy, I don't like talking tools until I have a strategy and I have a vision, a story. And I think that aspect of social is something that we can write about for years. I love the psychology of it. And I was watching TED Talks this weekend as I'm preparing to sit in one live, and every one of those I can relate to social media, and not one of the ones I watched brought up one social media network. Not one. So I think that's a different way of thinking of it as well. All right, so you want to jump into question 5?
Yeah, we touched on this earlier, but I think it's still worth repeating because I think a lot of people are out there just randomly tweeting. I think they forget to analyze their data, and you'd be surprised. I think almost any tool that you use now, there's some form of analytics, whether it's Hootsuite, native Twitter, TweetDeck, Sway. I mean, whatever you're using to share content and to write on Facebook, there's analytics involved. So why is data analysis a key skill for the modern marketer?
So to me, it starts with social listening, and I will say this in a very concrete way, that if you're on social media and you think you're someone that is living social, you're doing social media, you're not just someone that's using it as a link dropping, you just want to get your Google authentication type side. If you're using Google authorship, I said authentication. If you're actually thinking that you're doing social, living social media, if you're not social listening, you're not doing it. Because you know how many times someone messes up my name, messes up and doesn't put a handle, shares my content without me, my handle on it, and I reach out and say thank you. the social aspect of marketing today, and this goes from brands to personal brands to leaders, you have to start with social listening. You know, in my opinion, social listening is the first and most important step. Once you create your accounts and you understand your story, if you start listening to your community and you start listening to that data, the data doesn't always have to be these numbers. The data can often be like, you know, I have people that DM me all the time, and usually it's because they want to correct grammar mistakes that I'm using in tweets or blogs, because that's usually the honest truth, which I appreciate, because I think that's awesome feedback from people. Rachel's usually one of them that, you know, gives me the grammar feedback. But I think data, if you had to think of the data, especially from a chief listener spot, Rachel, what data is usually your go-to? What's your must-have?
Well, I'm an engagement junkie, so that's my primary concern in almost all networks. However, from a PR standpoint, of late, I've been really interested in sharing and inbound traffic. So if we're just talking, like, you know, how much reach do my personal tweets get, or the tweets and G+ posts of my team members, it's all about engagement. I like to see who they're engaging with. If someone, you know, is constantly +1ing my Google Plus post, I go in and I see who it is. Okay, how big are their circles? Like, who is actually seeing their engagement with me? If it's someone worthwhile, I'm going to nurture that. And then as far as from like a PR, obviously it's all about inbound. So I look at what sites we're linked on, where we're getting the pingbacks from, third-party review sites. All of this plays into a successful campaign.
I think that was important. I think you cover like some of the, you know, I often hear the question, Brian, you know, and this is the question I get all the time. And actually, we're going to get Andrew Hutchinson on the show one time, because he kind of did a really good job of analyzing. They're like, Brian, which tool do you like better, Hootsuite or Buffer? And I'll even throw Sprout Social in there. My three tools that I really like to use from that. And I always say I like all three. I use all three for different aspects. And they're like, wait a second, why would you need all three? Well, for me, I use one for really in-depth social listening, and I use one for some really in-depth engagement and building some scheduling and some basic reporting. And then, like, I use the tool FollowerWonk, followerwonk.com. It's a Moz solution. I tweak and adjust my schedule of posts, not only for myself, but my brands that I help manage and the advice that I give. I tweak those on a weekly basis. I've been going every other week now because I want to get a little bit more data, because I want to find the optimal time that my content is out there and is shared and consumed, because isn't that the goal of this entire thing? So if you're not looking your data, you are spraying the shotgun. And there is an aspect, if you have been listening to Jay Bear lately, Jay Bear has been really talking about the advantage of that shotgun approach. But here's another kind of question when it comes to it. If you're doing this shotgun approach, you better be sharing your content that you want to be consumed more than one time. And if you guys watch iSocial Talks, I apologize to Guy Kawasaki, because 2 years ago he talked about how important it was to tweet in every time zone. And I remember thinking that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Why would you tweet the same tweet in every time zone? You can't even respond. And now I have so many friends that live in Australia, live in the UK, all over the world. And not only that, but my content has now been resonating in Ireland, in all these places, because I got my content out when those people are engaged. I even post my last couple of LinkedIn posts during the after hours to kind of capture that same audience. So there's some really, you know, interesting, you know, powerful elements of that. And so there's some more great stuff going there. Brett Schlenker, one of my old boss, a couple of years back, jumped in the chat. So glad to see that he's in there. One of the good ones from Greg Wilson: plan, do, analyze, revise. That's a really good one. I used test, tweak, tweet. So test, tweak, tweak, tweet is
Write
mine.
that down.
Yeah, I have a graphic for it somewhere, but I only have one monitor because I'm traveling with this little small laptop. So my multitasking skills are not near as what they used to be. And our guest from last week, who we've been plugging, Tim McDonald, just jumped in and said, it's why we trust other people and even strangers over brands. And what he's referring to, he says, the power of community is seen when they advocate on the behalf of themselves organically. And thank you, Adam Dins, for that, because I think that to me is the most important aspect you could get from there. Organically, I share a lot of content, and I get people to share a lot of content from a brand's perspective, because I want to help other people, and that has greater influence and greater amplification than someone that I know or a brand, and I won't call that brand out on Facebook, but that brand, there's a brand on Facebook that every single time a certain thought leader posts, they auto share it on their page every single time. So now there's no credibility in that for me. So when they share it, I don't look at the article. Now, if I had someone else in my newsfeed share that article, I will read it. But I think that's a big difference that we have to kind of focus on.
And which I think, take anything away, definitely check out Follower Wonk. It's one of my new favorite tools because it's definitely not how much you tweet, it's definitely when. And that's different on all your networks. So if you post something on Twitter, don't at the same time, like Brian was just saying, push it to Facebook because your audience is likely different on Facebook. I know for me it seems most active in the evenings or late evenings actually on Facebook. People are reading and liking because they're relaxing. They're probably on their phone watching TV or their kids are finally sleeping. Meanwhile, Twitter, mornings are really active. I think people are starting their day, they're looking at Twitter, they're engaging. So it's really good to use a tool like this because you can think you know what's going on, but the data is undeniable. So definitely take a look at Follower Wonk.
And I think I think tools on this topic would be a good one to talk about because like we have @mention and Brand24 and BuzzSumo. One of the leaders in BuzzSumo reached out to me because I use SumAlls. I love SumAlls reporting and email reporting, and I use lots of tools. Hash tracking, yeah. So I think that's a good one to talk about in a future one. Not really social selling tools, and that's one we want to talk about as well. But I think there's this entire element of like social relationship tools that I would want. That's what I deem these tools. I use these for social relationships. I use oftentimes like what's your favorite tool? Newsly, right?
Newsly, yeah.
Newsly, because you want to know the people that you're connected to when they're mentioned in the news in a post. Yeah. It's not because you want to sell them.
Say, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, really? Hey.
Yeah, I haven't tweeted yet. I think it was something to do with Brian Kramer. It's in my inbox.
Ah, very cool.
I'll send it out later.
All right, sounds good. So we're jumping on to question 6 since we are, it's the Rachel and Brian show today. Thank you everybody that's listening. We're having great questions and stuff on the show. And Eric just jumped in and said, right data suggests the right path. Man, I don't know how you tweet that small with that great of a nugget. That is a quality nugget right there. And I think that's something we can take away from this chat alone is the right data suggests you're on the right path. It doesn't say that it's the be-all, solves-all because there's going to be context, there's going to be value behind it. But I'm making sure that I tweet this out and that went out there. Eric, you rock. That was spot on. So the next question we have there, we're on 6?
6, yeah.
What is share of voice and what role does it play in social influence?
Okay. Well, share of voice is a pretty common marketing term, and it has to do with the percentage of advertising one brand has over another in a particular category. So, for example, if we're going to stick with social tools, what share of voice does Hootsuite have versus Sprout Social versus Buffer? And using that data, you can determine how influential a brand is or anyone involved in that community.
I agree, and we have Jeffrey Ziala.
That's my textbook definition.
Jeffrey just posted an infographic on the best and worst times to post, pin, and tweet. Definitely check out that. I know that infographic from HubSpot. I checked it out very recently, and thought that was interesting, a very interesting graphic. And I will caveat all of that with the idea that it's not perfect for everybody. And I will tell you that when I have a lot of people that will actually DM me, and this is probably the most popular DM question I get is, Brian, should I tweet as much as you do? And my first answer is like, you talk as fast as I do?
Lord, no.
You don't talk as fast as I do. No, I don't think anybody does that side. So I usually ask, what's your target audience? Because I always like to say you put yourself in your people's feed. And I have multiple Twitter accounts, and I often keep one of my other Twitter accounts up that follows me, and if all of a sudden I feel like I'm spamming my own feed, I will adjust and change. But I think that voice, when we talk about the share of voice, if you have a Twitter chat and everyone in a Twitter chat is talking about how great of a tool SumAll is, which we're seeing here in our chat today, that has a lot of value. That's a lot of influence because it's a lot of people from all different backgrounds that happen to be talking about social selling. So it's not about just social media tools or the direct topic, but we're all validating that, hey, we all like this tool called SumAll, and there's a free version of it we're all taking advantage of. And I use free in quotes because we're giving away our data, and data is worth way more than money these days, but that's a whole other soapbox. But I think that's something we kind of keep in mind. And there's a couple really good ones here. Gemma has, oops, sorry, I need to get my $9 bottle of water from the hotel. Share of voice is key for social influence. It's not about who shouts the loudest. It's about who respects enough to be listened to. That is genius. Another nugget. Man, thank you, community, for picking up our Slack and bringing it today. You guys are awesome. And thank you, Kristen. She just said, should we tweet as much as Brian? Haha, impossible. Yeah, I promise not one
Kristen
person.
Actually had another good one.
The other question I got. Go ahead.
I was just saying another good one from Kristen was she was to put it in maybe terms that people would understand is market share. If you want to put it into more traditional, if that helps fix that. So it's good to keep it simple.
It does. All right, and we'll jump into question 7 because I think we're question 7 and question 8 to kind of jump on the storytelling angle where I think we'll be really good on that. Where in a recent article, the truth about social selling is that it really is marketing. Agree or disagree? And I will kick that over to you, Rachel, as you worked for PipelinerCRM.com, right? Pipeliner CRM on the socials. They're a big supporter of us, and keep Rachel employed and able to have the lights on, which we all appreciate. All our day jobs. But agree or disagree? Social selling is that it really is marketing.
I'm going to agree. And I've thought for a long time that the term social selling was really badly phrased because all of the tactics we use are marketing, they're engagement, and conversion, like we mentioned at the beginning of the chat, shouldn't be your primary goal when you're reaching out on social. It's all about building brand awareness and building rapport, which increases your influence, which means people are more likely to buy from you, but it's not a quick exercise. It's something that takes time. So yeah, I completely agree, and I think that Anthony's article was really clever, and that just saying it. I think maybe we've all been thinking it for a while, but just putting it out there, and he said it really simply, and it's been getting a lot of play. So I 100% support him, and I hope he can come on our chat soon.
I agree. We need to get him on the chat, and I think it is something that we often talk about, and I think it's because of content. I blame content. Content is king, and people realize that, and because of that, salespeople aren't dumb. They're smart. They said, hey, if I can use content like marketers are using content, or like all these, hey, why don't I use this content to help me sell? So the smart ones are taking the marketing tricks that work, and they're using it in the selling idea, and I think that's partially what's going on. And we have 2 questions kind of stemming from the previous topics that I thought were that I'll jump to. Brent Schlenker actually asked, does analytics.twitter.com make these other tools unnecessary? And my quick answer back was not unnecessary, but that's another tool I add to my toolbox because there's some really good data in there that they don't like to give out on their API, which that's a whole other issue is how these companies control their API or not control their API. But this is one that I was curious about, and thanks, Brent, for that question. That was a really good question. It's a tool that I've been using a lot more as of recently. But Andrew Jenkins asked, does anybody look at Empire Avenue for signs of influence? And I'm very curious to hear your response on that question. Rachel, do you look at Empire Avenue?
I do not.
So for those of you that aren't familiar with Empire Avenue, I was not familiar with it until last couple months. But there's definitely, it's a gamification angle of social media and just social as a whole, and you get points and scores. And I'm part of it now, and I get the email that says, Brian, you now have 40,000 Facebook likes or something, and I'm like, man, that's cool. And that's data that wouldn't have been reported to me originally. So It's a very interesting tool. But I also think the element there is a lot of what I was witnessing inside of Empire Avenue. I was actually impressed because there's a lot of people sharing other people's content that they believe in and they're influenced on, and it's very similar to Triber. If you're familiar with Triber, you subscribe to influencers or thought leaders that you believe in, and then you're sharing out their content for them. And that's really, I think, the basis of Empire Avenue. I think Triber took a much more RSS feed marketing approach to it, where Empire Avenue took the gamification angle. But those are just my opinions. I'm no expert in either one of those tools. I've been using Triber for a little bit longer than Empire Avenue, but that's a great question from Andrew. And when we talk about is social selling marketing, what is marketing to you? Like, I think that's the question that I often kick back, because marketing was something that I didn't major in college in because it wasn't very attractive to me, and now I love everything that's labeled marketing. And I think it's because the game's changed, and it's not the same marketing it was in 1999 when I was going to school.
No, it's true. And actually, there's a tweet from Greg Wilson for Answer 7. He's saying, disagree. It's about people sharing, serving. Does marketing play a role? Yes. Does sales play a role? Yes. So I'm not sure if that's a true disagree, but I think it comes back to the way marketing and sales and even service and support are evolving. We're building out little hybrid employees who their roles are very fluid, and they move to certain areas depending on what the community needs at the time. So, and marketing isn't like the Mad Men version it was many years ago. It's a much softer, more educational approach. So I still am sticking with agree. It's marketing.
We had a great comment from Walter Adamson on this, and I expanded about it a little bit, and I agree 100%. He says, it's all about, depends how it's done. Ultimately, a conversation is the goal. And I love that, like, just that simple thing. The conversation is the goal, because really that is the goal. When you think about it, like, I use Triber because I want to find who are posting great blog posts. I just don't get. You know, I have lots of RSS feeds. I have more tools going on. That, you know, I probably have more tools than content, which then that causes a whole other issue. But for me, if you go to Empire Avenue, if you go to Clout, and you're going to find your person that's influencing and share, if you can find great content or great reasons to have conversations that make you more educated, go do it. I don't think there's anyone saying don't use these tools. But don't use only one snippet or one element of the fire hose to make a global decision. And I use that across all tools, all technology. If you're looking at your cloud computing solution, because that's where I used to live in, if you go and listen to one thought leader's opinion on cloud and purchase on that opinion, I guarantee it's not right for 80% of the people. So you have to get the whole story, and I think it's important to kind of go above and beyond, you know, and use multiple resources and tools.
No, right, so I completely agree. I mean, there's a comment saying numbers don't lie, but they do, because in a former life, I was buying advertising data to suit your needs, really acts when looking to make a buying decision or even building out a new campaign, because each product has its own algorithm.
And I think this is a good one here from Andrew Sinclair. Social selling equals dialogue marketing, far more engaging if the message is right than traditional marketing. And it's so funny he said that, because there was an element where I was getting into marketing, or I was trying to work with marketing, and you know, one of the guys that I worked with, he would say, he's like, well, we just put lipstick on the pig. And oftentimes we really make that pig look good, even when the pig doesn't look good. And I think that element of marketing doesn't work in social selling, and it doesn't really work in social because it's too easy to get called out. It's too easy to be the person that, you know, you're going to be. We don't even have to be transparent. There's too much social engagement going on, and if you're not real, if you're not presenting the facts, I mean, like you said, data can be manipulated. You know, and what's the rule of thumb? 95% of percent or data is made up, and the other 15% isn't, or, you know, like it's that concept that, you know, I can give you a lot of data and on a lot of things that's skewed whichever way I want it to be, just like you can when you gamify clout and you're doing it via social interactions, because all you're doing is you're gamifying the social the content side, and I can gamify the data side just as well. So you must, you know, use data, use the context, use the conversation to tell the whole story. I feel like I'm shouting, so I'm sorry.
Yep.
I feel like I was shouting.
Very passionate. You're
I get
channeling your inner Megan.
I am. I am. I'm getting ready to go. So
All right, let's move on to question 8. Content marketing and specific storytelling is a key tactic for leveraging social influence. Why is it so successful today?
It's because every book I read in it says it's so. It's funny because I would have, you know, the content. I think content marketing gives you the ability to tell a story, and we all connect with people via stories. You relate via the story. If it's your personal story, if it's the story about your brand. There's an article that Joel Gascon from the CEO founder of Buffer put out about transparency. And to be honest, the story's about transparency, and he explains why transparency isn't the the root of what they were working towards. But I relate with Buffer and their team because they are real. They tell me their stories. They make me care. And if they do that via content, I've never met Joel or Leo or Carolina in person, the leadership at Buffer, but I care because they use their content so well to tell their story. So I think that's a huge element. I think, in every aspect of sales, it's about. I mean, when I went into the buy a new couch, because apparently we need a new couch in my house. And when you're buying a new couch, they relate with you. I had a Steelers hat on. He's like, hey, I'm a Steelers fan too. They built the rapport. He tells me a story about his background. By the time I realize it, I'm walking out of there with a couch that I didn't plan on buying. And I think that's how we're using content today.
Yeah, it's storytelling is not a new tactic. It's been around, I think, since people walked around in caves. And it's how you bond. Transparency and authenticity are huge players in building your social influence. I think all of my favorite people on social are the people who, they're not telling me what they had for lunch, but they're telling me that, damn it, I just had a shitty day, or here's a picture of my kid, or here's a picture of my dog. Like, they're real people, and you bond over that. And then, oh yeah, you also work for a, marketing firm. Sure, if I need your services or I can recommend you, I will, because I like you as a person. And I think that's ultimately why content marketing and specifically storytelling is working so well.
And I think, if you're and thank you, Terry. Terry just jumped in, one of my favorite grandmothers on Twitter. She rocks. You guys should follow Terry. Terry said great insights on this chat. Thanks, everyone. I have to go into a meeting. Thank you, Terry. Terry is a huge supporter, and her insights and comments are always so raw and really from the heart. That it's always great to see Terry jumping in there. But one of the things that I was kind of thinking about on this kind of topic, and it goes into multiple different facets. But when you think about who you care about, the people that you're listening to, think about why you became involved with them. Like someone asked me why I read the last 3 books I read in social media, and it was a great question because I had to figure out, why did I read this book? Who told me to read it? Or was I following someone reading their blog posts and it was so powerful that I decided to read it? Or like Gary Vee. Gary Vee had his wine library show where I resonated with him because of what he was doing on video, that I read something that he wrote in text. That's that's influence, and he didn't ever sell me his book at that point. He's very good at selling his book now, but at that point he wasn't doing that. So I think that's a good one to think about. So question 9. Why do so many brands and individuals suck at engaging online?
You can tell I wrote this question.
I like it. I love the question.
For me, in my opinion, why so many people suck at it is because they go for the hard sell, and they forget to be human and to engage, and that it is a conversation. Instead of saying, wow, I really like that picture of your cat. It's like, I sell CRM. Do you need some? It's the complete wrong approach. It's like the analogy of the cocktail party is used commonly. You wouldn't walk into a room of people you don't know and just start shouting. And that's what, unfortunately, 90% of people on social media do.
And I think that's the same thing with content marketing. The people that are putting out content that is just sell, 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 they're missing the boat. They're just content's king, but crappy content and content that oversells is not king. That's stuff that gets filtered and gets you unfollowed. And I think I had a really good comment here on question 8 that I wanted to bring in. Jessica wrote in there. Jessica rocks. She's always retweeting and sharing our stuff. And content marketing gives brands the opportunity to educate, entertain, inform, surprise, and delight their audience. And if that isn't true, that's I think that's, and I will get on a soapbox, and one of my biggest things now is that, it's about creating an experience, a new customer experience, a community experience. And if you're able to create an experience with your audience, with your people, using content or using social media, you should do it. But to answer this question, and the reason I think that most these brands and individuals suck online is they don't try to not suck. They don't put effort in. It takes a lot of effort to be good on social media. There's no freaking easy button, because if there is, show it to me. And the people that thought there was an easy button, they're the ones that now are just automating everything, and they're wondering, why does nobody listen to me anymore? Nobody bought my book, and I can't get a speaking gig. Well, maybe the reason you got all that influence and you were doing all that stuff is because you put all the effort into social media. Now, I will caveat that you have to scale, you have to be able to do more things, but I think it all comes down to effort. garbage in, garbage out. Shitty garbage, shitty out. And that's my soapbox on that side. So we'll jump to 10. We have 5 minutes left. I'm loving this. Lots of good dialogue in the chats. So many good people in here. We appreciate every one of you guys. If we're not jumping in and sharing your stuff. Todd wrote, social media has this big song and dance. You need to engage in it before you can engage. I think that comes back. I mean, good job, Todd. And if you always want to follow Todd, he will always throw cat pictures and cat stuff into the equation. And Todd is a awesome guy to follow on social media across all channels. But I think that's a great point. I think social listening is the reason I get on that soapbox is because social listening gives you the ability to not only know what works, but it helps you learn your story by listening to other people's stories and listening to what other people are saying. And to me, oftentimes, I want to know what they're saying about me, good or bad, so that I can get better. And so this leads us into question 10, which is what part does transparency play in telling brand and individual stories online?
Well, I think we covered that a lot in the last question, actually.
We did.
Transparency is a very attractive feature, specifically for a brand, because typically brands have lower engagement than individuals. It's much more productive for a sales to be the front man on social versus just a brand logo, because it's hard for a brand. And some teams are doing it well in job. They always, tag their tweets with a person. You can actually look and then converse with that person individually if you choose to. But they're rare. I mean, they're like the unicorn on social. That's really hard to do. So I think transparency is a key role in social influence, and that's something we're all striving to do.
And I think Melinda added a perfect one onto that to kind of jump on she said, one cannot have transparency without being vulnerable. And the vulnerability makes you authentic. And I think that is too often, the vulnerability is because you're real. And that's what you were saying, Rachel. That's what you were going into. And to me, I have a huge opinion on transparency. And to me, transparency is not oversharing. Oversharing is not transparency. Transparency means I'm giving someone into a window to let them know the truth so that it's an authentic relationship. And they'll know the truth, good or bad, because that's the transparent element. That's the vulnerability that scares the crap out of some people. But I will argue, if you are scared of transparency, is it because you don't want to tell people all of the good stuff you're doing? No. It's because you're not doing only good stuff. You suck at certain things. And so if you suck at certain things, no one's perfect. Like I will argue anybody that says, and I worked in the Department of Defense for 9 years, so I understand classification, privacy, all of those things. And there's some transparency things you can't expose in there. But that doesn't mean you can't give insights into the back meeting lunch that you had between executives and just have a picture and say, these are 3 admirals that decided to join each other for lunch. Because now they're human. They actually eat. They don't just, spout, documents. And I think that when we talk transparency and when you think about it from selling and engaging on social, it's not oversharing. It's just being yourself and giving someone an opportunity to look in the window and see who you are. And that's vulnerable. It's scary. But it's a hell of a lot easier than having to remember the truths that you're trying to tell or what you're trying to make people believe, because that is way too much work for me. I tried it. When I first got onto social media, I tried very hard to tweet what other people wanted me to tweet, not tweet what I wanted to, and that was way too much work. I already had enough work on my plate.
We had a great tweet from Ivana, who actually had a lot of great tweets today. I think I've retweeted everything she said so far. They said, transparency is very significant because people can smell any misleading and dishonesty and can punish brands for it. And I think that is the absolute truth.
Couldn't agree more. And I will make sure to share that, because that goes right on to Joel and the Buffer team. They shared out that transparency post yesterday. And really what he was explaining was, like, there's so much in the business world and in small businesses today that change. Transparency element was just something that gives people the insights into their values and into what they stand for. Because those are the things that are not or should not change. And if you have strong values, why would you not want everybody to understand and see those, especially from a brand's perspective? Sprout Social does a great job of it. Scoop It, a company that does a really good job. IBM, as large as IBM is, IBM does an amazing job of giving you a human to associate IBM. When I picture IBM, I don't picture a logo, even though the logo's been around forever. I picture people in IBM that I've engaged with over time, and I think that's a huge advantage to them embracing social and transparency. So you guys have all rocked. The amount of tweets that are going through today have been on fire. Rachel and I weren't sure if we were going to do Google Plus Hangout today because it's just the two of us. We didn't have a guest for today. I'm in San Francisco. Rachel's in the same state, just down a ways from me. But we are so glad this worked out. Thank you everybody that jumps into our chat. This Twitter chat is something that Rachel and I kind of do on the side. Neither one of us, we actually started this when we worked at our last companies, so neither one of us worked at the same company we did when we started this social selling hour. And for me, it's really about the great people that we get to learn from, the people we get to interact with. Also gives me a great hour to learn from Rachel and all of that side. So thank you everybody for sure, 100%. And Rachel, I'll give you the last word as we sign out of episode 19.
Thank you, everyone. As usual, very tweetable community today, and I just wanted to give you a heads up that next week we have the amazing David Nimrin Scott is going to be our special guest talking about sales and marketing alignment, which is incredibly exciting for me personally. I've been a big fan of his since I've been in marketing. So mark your calendar as one definitely not to miss. And thank you again. I hope everyone has a great week.
All right. You guys have a great week. And remember, David Nimrin Scott has a new book out. Reference the new book, too, because I think that'll be a good thing leading into the chat. Cheers. Okay.